I can't help rewrite this by making only slight changes because it's a long passage from what appears to be a copyrighted script. If your goal is to have the same style for your own content, here's a completely original version that captures the same emotional pacing and themes without closely copying the source. Something important is making its way into your life, and the journey began much earlier than you may think. Before you continue, take a quiet moment to focus on these words. This message is here to encourage reflection, and perhaps it will connect with feelings you have carried for a long time. There may have been moments when you sensed that something meaningful was developing beneath the surface. Maybe you questioned those feelings. Maybe you told yourself you were overthinking small events or giving too much meaning to ordinary conversations. Yet no matter how many times you tried to dismiss those thoughts, a quiet part of you continued to notice. Your inner voice has been speaking softly all along. It did not arrive through dramatic signs or loud announcements. Instead, it appeared through small moments that stayed with you, gentle impressions that returned when you least expected them, and feelings that refused to disappear completely. Even while your attention was on work, family, or everyday responsibilities, those quiet impressions continued to return. Logic may have encouraged you to move on, but your heart kept reminding you that there was more to the story than what you could see. There may soon come a moment when someone says something that confirms what you have quietly suspected for a long time. If that happens, your first feeling may not be surprise. Instead, it may feel like recognition, as though a missing piece has finally found its place. That is because some truths are felt long before they are spoken. Long before there are explanations or clear answers, our hearts sometimes recognize patterns our minds cannot yet understand. We notice small details without realizing how much they matter until later. Perhaps there has been one person who continued to appear in your thoughts without any clear reason. Maybe certain memories remained vivid, while others slowly faded away. Maybe a simple conversation stayed in your mind far longer than you expected. Those experiences do not always have an immediate explanation, yet they often encourage us to pay closer attention to ourselves. Our logical mind prefers facts, evidence, and certainty before accepting something as true. Our intuition works differently. It quietly gathers small pieces of information, notices changes in behavior, remembers tiny details, and sometimes recognizes a pattern before we consciously understand it. Because of that, you may have doubted yourself from time to time. You may have wondered whether you were imagining things or reading too deeply into ordinary situations. You may have questioned your own judgment more than once, yet the feeling never completely disappeared. It stayed patiently in the background, not demanding your attention, simply waiting until life revealed a little more of the picture. Whatever is unfolding now did not begin yesterday. It has been growing quietly over time, often unnoticed. While you were living your daily life, someone else may have been sorting through emotions they struggled to express. There are people who stay silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because what they feel matters deeply to them. Sometimes silence comes from uncertainty. Sometimes it grows from fear of rejection or misunderstanding. Sometimes people worry that speaking honestly could change a relationship they value, so they choose to wait instead. As days become weeks and weeks become months, that silence can become heavier than the truth itself. It is possible that this person has thought about you more often than you realize. They may remember conversations you barely recall. They may notice the little things that most people overlook. Small gestures, brief smiles, simple words, or quiet moments may have carried much greater meaning for them than you ever imagined. There may have been several occasions when they almost spoke honestly. Perhaps they rehearsed the words in their mind, believing they were finally ready, yet each time, fear encouraged them to wait just a little longer. Fear has a way of convincing people that another day will be easier than today. Unfortunately, tomorrow often becomes another tomorrow, and then another, until silence begins to feel heavier than honesty. Without realizing it, you may have sensed this struggle. Maybe there were moments when the connection between you felt stronger than the conversations you actually shared. Maybe certain interactions stayed with you for reasons you could never fully explain. Sometimes a single glance, a familiar smile, or a quiet moment leaves a lasting impression because something meaningful remains unspoken. That Quiet awareness is different from imagination. It is simply your mind recognizing that not every important truth is expressed immediately. Unspoken feelings rarely disappear on their own. They often remain beneath the surface, waiting patiently for the right moment to be expressed. Perhaps that is why some people continue returning to our thoughts long after we have gone separate ways. Some connections remain meaningful because they still carry unfinished conversations or emotions that have never been fully shared. Now, however, something appears to be changing. The hesitation that once seemed impossible to overcome is beginning to lose its strength. The silence that lasted so long may finally be reaching its limit. There comes a point when honesty feels easier than pretending everything is fine. There comes a moment when speaking openly brings more peace than staying silent. When that moment arrives, even a few sincere words can change the direction of a relationship. As you reflect on this message, pay attention to your own thoughts rather than searching for certainty outside yourself. Sometimes, the greatest value of a message is not that it tells us something completely new, but that it helps us recognize what we already sensed deep inside. This journey is not only about another person's emotions, it is also about learning to trust your own inner wisdom. You may discover that many of the truths you have been waiting to hear are simply confirming what your heart quietly understood long ago. If someone chooses to open their heart to you, it may not be because their feelings suddenly appeared. It may simply be because they have finally found the courage to express emotions they have carried for much longer than you ever knew. Sometimes, what appears calm on the outside hides a great deal beneath the surface. People often spend months or even years trying to convince themselves that certain feelings will disappear, only to realize that genuine emotions do not fade simply because they are ignored. In the end, honesty has a way of finding its voice, and when it does, it often brings clarity, understanding, and the chance for a meaningful new beginning. They may have been focusing on other parts of their life. They may have kept themselves occupied with work, family responsibilities, or everyday routines. Yet the feelings remained quietly present, refusing to disappear no matter how hard they tried to set them aside. The connection remained. The questions remained. Over time, carrying all of those unspoken emotions became much heavier than simply telling the truth. That is why this confession is important, not only for them, but for you as well. Because unresolved situations affect both people. Even when nothing is spoken, even when life appears to be moving ahead, a part of your attention stays connected to what has never been answered. A part of your energy stays attached to what has never been fully understood. When the truth finally arrives, something begins to clear. The emotional atmosphere around the situation starts to change. The uncertainty that once occupied so much space slowly begins to disappear, and something valuable returns to you: your clarity, your confidence, and your trust in yourself. That may be the greatest gift hidden inside this entire experience. Because once everything becomes clear, you begin to understand something deeply meaningful. Your intuition was not leading you in the wrong direction. Your emotional awareness was never a weakness. Your sensitivity was never a flaw. You were noticing something genuine. You were sensing something before it had a clear form. You were recognizing a truth before it had words to explain it. Many people spend years doubting themselves. They ignore their instincts. They silence their inner voice. They believe that only what can be seen should be trusted. But life often teaches a different lesson. Sometimes awareness arrives first. Sometimes understanding follows later. Sometimes the heart recognizes a truth before the mind can explain it. And that is exactly why this moment carries so much meaning. It confirms more than another person's feelings. It confirms your ability to trust yourself. Think about everything you have gone through recently: the emotional growth, the lessons in patience, the moments of uncertainty, and the times when you wanted answers but had none. The seasons when you had to let go of control. None of those experiences were wasted. Every single one was preparing you. Every experience was helping you build greater inner strength. Every lesson was teaching you how to stay steady even when the future seemed uncertain. You were learning how to stand firmly on your own foundation. You are learning how to find peace without needing immediate answers. You are learning how to trust yourself more each day. Because of that personal growth, you are now able to receive the truth from a different place, not from desperation, not from fear, not from emotional dependence, but from stability, and that changes everything. When the confession finally arrives, it is important to remember one thing. Honesty does not automatically create a perfect ending. Truth does not guarantee a perfect beginning. What honesty gives you is clarity. It replaces confusion with understanding. It replaces assumptions with facts. It replaces uncertainty with awareness. And once you have awareness, you receive something incredibly valuable: choice. You become free to decide what happens next. You are no longer reacting to guesses. You are no longer trying to fill in missing pieces on your own. You are no longer searching endlessly for hidden signs. You are responding to reality. And that is where true strength begins. Real strength is not about controlling another person. It is not about forcing life to go a certain way. It is not about making everything happen according to your plans. Real strength comes from seeing clearly and acting with self-respect. It comes from staying grounded no matter what happens next. It comes from believing in your own worth. If you are listening to these words and you feel emotion rising inside you, pay attention to that feeling. Not because it predicts what will happen, but because it reveals something about your inner world. Emotions often point toward the areas of life that matter the most. They show us what deserves our attention. They remind us of what our heart has been quietly carrying. If you feel calm while listening to this message, that calm may also be meaningful, because genuine truth often brings peace instead of panic. When something matches what we already know deep within ourselves, it can feel strangely familiar. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, simply familiar, as though a missing piece has quietly found its place. And if this message feels familiar to you, perhaps your intuition recognizes something inside it. Perhaps it speaks to a truth you have already been sensing. Perhaps it reminds you of something your heart has understood for a very long time. As this moment comes closer, avoid the temptation to force anything. Do not rush the process. Do not chase answers because of fear. Do not create pressure where patience is still needed. Let everything unfold naturally. Allow people to reach their own understanding. Allow honesty to arrive at the right moment, because truth that appears naturally carries a different kind of power. It feels genuine, it feels sincere, it feels lasting. And when it finally arrives, you may discover something truly remarkable. Your intuition was not only sensing a connection, it was also sensing the right timing. It was recognizing that certain truths could only come to the surface when both people were ready to face them. And being ready changes everything. As you continue moving forward, there is another important layer to understand. The greatest change may not happen within the relationship itself. The greatest change may happen inside you. After the truth has been spoken, you may notice a quiet sense of peace spreading through your life. Questions that once consumed your thoughts begin to lose their power. Thoughts that once repeated over and over start becoming quieter. The need to constantly analyze every situation begins to fade. This happens because clarity has a powerful effect on the human mind. Uncertainty creates tension. Unanswered questions create pressure. The unknown demands emotional energy. When understanding finally arrives, much of that energy is released. You may feel lighter than before. You may feel more present in everyday life. You may feel more connected to yourself. You may even look back at old memories and suddenly understand them from a completely different perspective. Moments that once seemed confusing begin to make sense. Conversations that once felt unfinished reveal a deeper meaning. Long periods of silence that once felt painful finally become understandable. This does not pull you back into the past. Instead, it frees you from carrying the weight of it. It allows you to move forward without the burden of unanswered questions. And from that moment, a new chapter begins. A chapter built on awareness instead of uncertainty. A chapter built on honesty instead of assumptions. A chapter built on choice instead of emotional longing. That kind of foundation changes everything, because when you are standing in clarity, You no longer need constant reassurance from other people. You no longer feel the need to analyze every message or every conversation. You no longer search for hidden meanings in every pause, every silence, or every interaction. Your nervous system slowly begins to relax. Your mind becomes calmer. Your heart becomes steadier. And even if there are still questions waiting ahead, those questions no longer feel frightening. They no longer control your emotions. Instead, they become part of life's natural unfolding, something you can face with confidence instead of fear. You begin to trust that whatever truth needs to reach you will arrive at the right time. That trust creates a quiet strength that cannot easily be shaken. It allows you to keep moving forward without carrying the constant weight of doubt. Instead of living in endless uncertainty, you begin living with greater peace, greater confidence, and a much deeper connection to yourself. That inner peace becomes the real transformation. It reminds you that clarity is not only about understanding another person's feelings, it is also about understanding yourself more completely. And once you reach that place, you realize that the greatest gift was never simply the confession itself. The greatest gift was becoming the kind of person who could receive the truth with wisdom, confidence, self-respect, and lasting inner peace.